Morning. You guys ready? Awesome. Hopefully you're fired up today to worship God. What a great week we had. Of course, the Madison crew had a baptism. You know, Bronze is starting to be the preacher man there. He's started leading a Bible talk there, and we have another gal here visiting from Madison, Lene here. You got to love up on her. So it's awesome. I don't know what God's doing there, but it's happening. We're like, okay, all right, you can't ignore that thing. It's going on. So, and then today, we're going to have 2 more baptisms today. So it's going to be about 30 minutes right after the end here. You're going to want to hang around down in the fellowship hall. It'll be very, very exciting. But you know what? We have a special visitor here today. Yes, Heather's mom is here. Her name is Freddie, which is short for Frederica, right? Now, we got a chance to go out last night. We ate together, and she told us some stories about Heather. So, yeah. So if you guys want to know any of that stuff, right there. And then you'll understand how Heather became the way she did. So that's a whole nother thing. So I also wanted to honor the ICCM students who finally, after years, have finished their classes, and they'll be graduating in January. Got Victor, Marlene, and Candace. Now, if you've seen on the program, you're not going to want to miss this. Candace is getting appointed, believe it or not, as a cyber women's ministry leader. So her stock just went up. So that's awesome, right? That means, of course, we're planting next year we're going to be planting 3 more churches in the Midwest here. And that means they're going to ask her to get in there and help them with their cyber ministries. She's going to be very, very busy. And we have 3 weeks left for 2020. Or 2021. Man, I'm already behind. It's interesting how things go after a while. All right, as you reflect back this last year, what was it like for you? All right, a lot of victories, a lot of defeats. You know, there's a lot of great things that happen. You know, I lost 30 pounds last year. But I need to let you know I gained 4 back. That Thanksgiving thing, I don't know. But I'm going to keep going. All right. A lot of great things happened. Malik and Alexis, they got engaged, right? That's awesome. All right. Levante and Bree, something happened there. They got, they're sitting together here. They're all smiley and all that kind of thing. A lot of great things happen. But maybe you're one of those people that 29 awesome things can happen and you get that one bad thing and you focus on that. What do you focus on? The good or the bad? Whatever the case, we got to learn from whatever happened, our victories and our defeats. The title of our lesson today is called The Learning Curve. Thought I'd throw that in there for those students going through finals, right? Look in Philippians chapter 3, and Paul had a few things to say about this thing. Now, the term, the learning curve, came in around 1855. Herman Ebbinghaus. He used it in the field of psychology. And the idea is the learning curve usually starts off where you shoot up, and then you kind of taper off a little bit, and then you got the slow growth. Well, it's not quite like that in the kingdom, and we're going to talk about that. Now, there are learning curves that we go through. You have a baby. That's a quick learning curve. Am I right, parents? Never saw that one coming. Ask Vlad and Nicole. They're on their second one. They had a baby this year, right? And then as Frankie and Maritza shared, you got married. Yeah, what did we do? You got married. No, they're not pregnant or anything. You got married. That's a learning curve. Am I right in saying that? In fact, Maritza talked about that. Everything she said was right along with this. Come on, the Spirit. All right, look in Philippians chapter 3, verse 10. He says, I want to know Christ, and the power of his resurrection, the fellowship of sharing in his sufferings, becoming like him in his death, and so somehow to attain to the resurrection from the dead. Not that I've already obtained all this or have already been made perfect, but I press on to take hold of that for which Christ Jesus took hold of me. Brothers, I do not consider myself yet to have taken hold of it. But one thing I do, forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead. I press on toward the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus. All of us who are mature should take such a view of things. And if at some point you think differently, that too God will make clear to you. Only let us live up to what we have already attained. You know, Paul's an incredible example here. Now, Paul, you look at his spirit, and he's, man, I want to know Christ. And he says, and I want to even understand his death. I want to die like him. I can honestly say I'm not there, okay? But you look at his spirit, and he's like, I'm not there yet. And if you would think anybody's there, it would be Paul. He's an intense dude. But we can learn from his struggle here. And he says, I forget, at the end, I forget what's behind and strain for what is ahead. He says, I press on to what's ahead. And he says, all of us who are mature should take a view of such things. And he says, finally, he says, but let us live up to what we've already obtained. I remember in high school, my curve was the opposite. I didn't do this thing, I went this thing. And then at the end, when I matured, I kind of popped up. Am I alone in this? No. You know, I just goofed off. Freshman, sophomore, junior, I almost got kicked out of school. Yeah. And then I had to, you know what? I got to think about my future, and I started to pop up there at the end. But then I went to college, and I did the same thing. Hey, college, you know, party. And then got serious a little bit later on. And I did very well in school, so I ramped it up. But in the kingdom, a lot of times, it's a lot different. You know, you're studying the Bible, you're fired up, and then you go skyrocket, and then Satan slaps you down. Boom. And you go up, boom, boom, boom. Why? Because it's a battle. And every battle is a learning curve. And it depends on how hard we're challenged that we drop. But the question is, are you learning from your challenges? The harder the challenge, the more the growth, unless, of course, you quit. Point number one is press on. Now, you look at this passage, it says that twice in verse 12 and verse 14. He says, but I press on to take hold of that for which Christ took hold of me. And then verse 14, I press on toward the goal to win the prize. All right, now there's a passage here that Maritza actually even quoted, James chapter 1. James chapter 1. We're going to talk about this a little bit. James chapter 1, starting in verse 2. James 1, verse 2. It says, consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. Perseverance must finish its work so that you may be what? Mature. That's what we're talking about. And complete, not lacking anything. If any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to him. But when he asks, he must believe and not doubt, because he who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. That man should not think that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all he does. And that can be us. We can be unstable, up and down, like tossed. That's a great way to put it. Tossed about by the waves. And he begins by saying, consider it pure joy. Well, when you're in the midst of it, it sure doesn't seem like joy. And we got to understand what he's saying here. Hey, you got to rejoice because you're going to grow a lot through this. But ask for wisdom. How do you handle this? Get advice. Talk to people who've been through it. Learn from their mistakes. That's called humility. Once again, the greater the trial, the greater the growth. I remember shortly after I was baptized, I remember reading this passage and I thought, oh, that's a quick way to grow. I want to grow. So I started praying for trials. That is the dumbest thing I've ever done. I got slapped around. It's messed up. I remember one person saying, you're not praying for trials anymore, are you? I was going through it up and down. But I know that there's so many things that can throw us off. So many distractions. And a lot of times they're not bad things like having a baby. Very challenging, very distracting. But a lot of great growth. You learn a lot about God's perspective when you're a father. You learn the heart. I appreciate what Shane was saying in the welcome. They lighten up your day. And that's how God feels about us. Of course, there's that COVID thing. That's a lot of fun, isn't it? How many of you gotten COVID? Oh, quite a few. Man, that just brings you down. Hard to keep going. The thing that happened to me mostly was I was lightheaded. I'd get up and I'd be like, that's a horrible feeling. And you never knew when it would hit you. And then, of course, the cough and, the weakness and all that. My twin brother texted me this week, and he's had it. He's like 11 days. He said, I haven't showered in 11 days. He says, I've been so sick. And it's everything you can think that went bad with this guy. But he's not alone. Did you learn from COVID? That's the question. I think God allowed this thing for us to learn a lot. A death in the family will do it. We need to be praying for JV and AJ. They've had like 3 funerals in the last few weeks. And they're in I think, Alabama or somewhere right now at a funeral. But that's a trial. But we always got to be on the learning mode. Then our finances. I appreciate Marvell sharing about them losing their jobs. That's a trial. And they learn through it, finances and contribution given to God. Then, of course, there's giving into sin. And bad things happen when you do that. But did you learn? There's a reality here. The reality is there's always going to be a challenge. Why? Because we are in a battle. And Satan is going to try to take you out. If you don't believe in Satan, then there are parts of the Bible you don't believe in. Because he's talked about quite a bit by numerous people. And so we're in a battle. And he wants you taken out. But we learn from the battle. The question is, how do you handle it? Do you press on? Do you grow? Is it a learning situation from you? We've always got to be in the learning mode. Pressing on means, okay, I went through this, I learned from it, what's next? Let's go. All wars are won by those who press on. By sitting still, you're not going to win the battle. In World War II, there was a general by the name of Patton. The guy's a little crazy. But they loved him because he was a little crazy. Planes would go by, he'd pull out his gun and he'd shoot at him, But he was so forceful that he drove the American juggernaut right through everything. And the Germans were scared to death of him. And they had a hard time because they couldn't keep up with him. They couldn't keep the gas to his vehicles to keep going. And one of the vehicles that he had was a Sherman tank. Sherman tank was named after a general in the Civil War by the name of William Tecumseh Sherman. And what he did was, at the end of the war, they just decided, okay, we've had enough. You're going to have to take this thing out. And he took his group of men, his fighting force, and he just made a path of destruction wherever he went in the South. Destroyed everything, burned everything. And finally, it closed the war a lot quicker because of his tenacity and how he drove people. And really, the pressing on is what this is all about. We've got to press on. I don't know if I told you that was point number 1, right? Okay, pressing on. Question is, what stops you? What throws you off? And did you learn from it? You know, it never changes. As you get older, all right, there's things that don't work as well as they did. And you can slow down. I hate that. You know, we get up, oh, what is that? Is there a muscle there? I don't know. Barb and I learned that we always have to be learning. And throughout our years of ministry, we realized what works in one place doesn't work in the other. What we did in Chicago didn't work in New York. And what worked in New York certainly wasn't going to work here. Different people. And Barb and I were in the ministry in Milwaukee in the 80s. And we ran a campus ministry that was amazing. We baptized like 78 people in 1 year. But what we did then, not going to work now. People are different. Society is different. And what I realized, I thought, man, I've seen it all. I can't ever say that. Because there's always something new coming, especially the way society is going today. It's like, whoa. If you don't continue to learn, you stop growing. It's challenging, but you've got to always have that mentality. Point number 2, strain toward what's ahead. He says, forget what's behind in verse 13. I don't know if you're there, Philippians 3. Let's go back there. Philippians 3, verse 13. He says, Brothers, I do not consider myself to have taken hold of it, but one thing I do, forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead. Now, he says, forget what's behind. Does that mean you forget everything? No. Because verse 16, he says, let us live up to what we've already attained. So you got to know where you're at to don't go backwards. So what does this mean? It says, don't let your failures own you. You got to keep fighting. Imagine if Peter quit, betrayed Jesus, and every morning when he heard the rooster crow, it was a reminder of how he failed. He could have allowed that to stop him. Instead, he used it to motivate him. And that's what we got to do. That's maturity. Same thing with Paul. Imagine Paul, every time he would speak, and you realize that he was killing Christians before he became one. Imagine he's speaking to a crowd and realizing, I killed that person's mother. I killed that person's brother. And that could have just hindered him from growing. Instead, he used it to motivate him. In fact, he talks about it. Go to 1 Corinthians 15. 1 Corinthians 15. Starting verse 9. Now, Paul is tremendously humble here. In verse 9, he says, For I am the least of the apostles, and do not even deserve to be called an apostle because I persecuted the church of God. But by the grace of God, I am what I am. And his grace to me was not without effect. No, I worked harder than all of them. Yet not I, but the grace of God that was with me. Whether then it was I or they, this is what we preach, and this is what you believe. He says, listen, I don't deserve to have this title as an apostle. Man, I was killing Christians. But he says, but by the grace of God, I am what I am. And he says, that grace was not without effect. No, I worked hard. What's he talking about? The idea of, listen, you're forgiven, you're born again, you can start over. That's what is exciting about baptism. People getting baptized today, when they get baptized, their past is over as far as God's concerned. They're starting over. Satan can't use that old stuff on you anymore. It's over. Now, Satan will try to get you to remember it. And when he does, say, yeah, I don't deserve it. And that's why I'm working hard. Because I dodged a bullet here. And I'm just so grateful that I've been forgiven. And Paul used it to motivate him. Now, sometimes Satan will try to pull you down with your past. And people will do that. Oh, you're a Christian? Hey, remember when you did this and you did that? And people will do that. Family people will do that. Family members. And that gives you an opportunity to say, yeah, but that's not me anymore. You know, he says we are to strain for what's ahead. What does that mean? The word strain means to exert to the utmost, to stretch to the limit or beyond the proper limit. Someone's straining, you can see it in their face. You can hear it in them. It's part of who they are. You know, a few days ago, Angie shared on WhatsApp about a movie. All right, and I think it's called 14 Peaks. And this guy, he's from Nepal. His nickname is Nims. This guy's a little crazy, okay? And he decides, I'm going to climb 14 of the tallest mountains in the world in, I don't know, like 3 months. Now, it's crazy enough just to climb one. If you said, hey, I climbed Mount Everest, you'd be like, whoa, dude, that's awesome. And then 13 other mountains. Be like, what are you thinking? Now, they interviewed some of the other people. There's an older guy. He said, hey, if somebody says that they enjoyed it, they're lying to you. It's nothing about it's fun. Okay? It takes a lot of straining. And you watch in the movie, and there's just, their lives are at risk all the time. And they go through all these traumatic things. They get to the top, and then it's take a few pictures, and yeah, here we are. Here it is. Yeah, we made it. All right, let's go down. You know? It's like, yeah, it's beautiful, but, you know, let somebody else do it. And then at one point, he's going down, and he slips, and he starts sliding. And it's almost at a, direct, and he's sliding, and then all of a sudden, he sees a rope, and he grabs onto it. His hands, and he saves himself. Nothing minor. Nothing minor. But you know there's a lot of straining that's going on. Okay, and so there was another guy who attempted to climb this one mountain like 4 or 5 times, never did it. And this NIMS guy said, come on with me, you'll make it. And then he said, throughout the climb, I kept saying, we're not going to make it. And he's like, yes, we will. We're going to make it. And he kept bringing things up, and he said, and then we made it. Now, it just took someone to believe that all that stress and strain and all that stuff is worth it. We're climbing mountains, guys. That's what we're doing. There's a song. You want me to sing it? I can almost... No, I won't sing. Miley Cyrus. All right, everybody, let's do it together. No. Let it rip. Yeah, you would like that, wouldn't you? On video, Facebook, yeah. Okay, listen to the words. I can almost see it. That dream I'm dreaming, we all got to have a dream. But there's a voice inside my head saying, you'll never reach it. Every step I'm taking, every move I feel, every move I make feels lost with no direction. My faith is shaking. But I got to keep trying, got to keep my head held high. There's always going to be another mountain. I'm always going to want to make it move. Always going to be an uphill battle. Sometimes I'm going to have to lose. Ain't about how fast I get there. Ain't about what's on the other side. It's the climb. The struggles I'm facing. The chances I'm taking. Sometimes might knock me down, but no, I'm not breaking. I may not know it, but these are the moments that I'm gonna remember most. And really, that's the key. You're gonna remember the battle. And it's gonna bring you back to victory. I'm gonna remember most, just gotta keep going. Just keep pushing on, because there's always gonna be another mountain. I'm always going to want to make it move, always going to be an uphill battle. Sometimes I'm going to have to lose. Ain't about how fast I get there. Ain't about what's on the other side. It's the climb. That's really the description of the Christian walk. Our goal is heaven. We got a dream about being with our Father forever. And we're in a battle. We're in battle for souls. Not just for all those out there, but for your own soul. You can't quit. And people have quit. There are a number of people have quit in this church this year. My heart goes out for them. Why would you go back? You never can feel great about being a quitter. Just can't. Unless you re-engage the battle and you tack it. And you win. That's what this is all about, guys. And you will influence other people by whether you keep going or you quit. But it's all a learning curve. Are you growing? You know, I appreciate Sarita. This was her third time studying the Bible. She studied through, took off. Studied through, took off. Said, no, you know what? This time it's a done deal. I'm in. That's a victory story. She can be able to preach about that. I'm preaching about it. It's awesome stuff. You got to win the battles, but you got to learn through the battle. Are you willing to strain for your relationship with God? At what point will you quit? That point that you quit, that's your love level. You've gotten to that point and you've said no more. That's your gratitude level. That's your faith level. Whatever the case, it's part of the learning curve. You learn a lot about your character and who you are. You quit early, you don't learn as much. And like I said, there's no great victory in quitting. Now, we've had some great examples in the church here also. I think about Victor Drobless. Victor Drobless. When he got here, he was in rough shape. Came here from Chicago, did a huge nosedive. Pulled out of it, did another huge nosedive. Pulled out of it, did another huge nosedive. He wanted to go on staff. I said, I can't put you on staff. Not where you're at. And then finally, with Victor Montano's help, he skyrocketed. He broke through. He did phenomenal. Beginning this year, he just started baptizing people, right? Of course, this summer we had the TNT thing. John Causey said, who's that guy? I want that guy. And he's gone. But that's awesome. He was able to go to Columbus, Ohio, and now he's an intern campus minister for that university. It's amazing. I think about Elisha. He's downstairs serving Kids Kingdom. But he was around for a while. And talk about strain. You can see it all over his face. But he made it through. Fought through. Is he perfect? Absolutely not. None of us are. But he made it. I think about Mireya. How awesome. I appreciate so much your willingness to fight to make it back. She had some major obstacles. She had to leave the country. But she fought her way back here. She's here today. She's awesome. That's stuff you can preach about. I think about Gladys. She's probably watching us. Here she is living in Brooklyn, New York. She's studying the Bible over Zoom for a long time. And the gals, Lynn and the gals just got in there. Angie, I don't know who else was in there. But they wrapped their arms around her, Selena. And she believed I need to be in Milwaukee. Yeah. So, of course, Angel's fired up. It's his mom. And they get her here. They move her here. She gets baptized. Now, you think about that. For most of her life, she's lived in New York. Same apartment. Yeah. Gone through a lot of stuff. And she ends up radically changing her lifestyle to be with us. She had to go through a number of things. Point number 3. Verse 16, he says, only let us live up to what we have already attained. That's point number 3. The battle is to grow and not go backwards. Now, sometimes you're going to lose. That's just the way it is. But you learn from it, and you go from it. But you got to learn. Look in Hebrews chapter 5. Hebrews chapter 5, starting verse 11. It says, we have much to say about this, but it is hard to explain because you're slow to learn. There's that learning curve. Slow to learn. In fact, though by this time you ought to be teachers, you need someone to teach you the elementary truths of God's Word all over again. You need milk, not solid food. Anyone who lives on milk, being still an infant, is not acquainted with the teaching about righteousness. But solid food is for the mature, who by constant use have trained themselves to distinguish good from evil. Starts off, he says, hey, you're slow to learn. Does that define you? Or are you quick to learn? He says, you ought to be a teacher by now, but you're not. In fact, you need to start over. It's bad when he says you got to just start over. And he says, you need milk. Infants drink milk. You can't give solid food to an infant. It doesn't work. This week, Jeremy got baptized, right? He's an infant in the Lord. That's expected. All right? You don't want to start teaching them, ministry 404 or something like that, right? You need to train and teach them. Raise them up. Now, Bron's here. You know, you got baptized in what, March? March. Would you consider him an infant? But he's leading a Bible talk, and he's been fruitful. Reached out to Maxime there. Maxime is awesome. But the thing I appreciate about Bronze is he's in the learning mode. You don't just start leading a Bible talk without someone teaching you and training you. And I appreciate those who are involved in all that. Marvell and what's this guy's name? Marcus. You know, there's a point in time when an infant needs to start crawling, then walking, and then feeding itself. If you have a baby that's 2 years old and it's still not crawling, there's a problem. Same in the church. Same in the church. How mature are you? It says in this passage, verse 14 in Philippians, it says, by constant use, they train themselves. That's how you're mature. You start training yourself. You don't wait for someone to challenge you on something. You do what's right. You don't just give in to sin. You fight the battle. You go after it. You attack it. You get help. And when you're knocked down, you get help again. You just don't try to do it on your own. That's foolishness. We're in a battle together. It's a team. And you never stop learning. The question is, are you still pressing on? Are you still straining ahead? Are you living up to what you've already attained? Or do you need to start over? You know, the church this year, with these two baptisms today, will have 39 additions. That's awesome. Now, here's the thing. That's a lot of infants. You just don't, you got to take care of it. I can't do all that. That means you guys got to raise up. And I want you to think about a year from now when you have 40 more new people or more, 50, who's going to take care of all those infants? The toddlers. And what I'm doing is I'm calling you to mature. A year from now, they'll be looking at Sarita thinking, wow, how do you know so much? Wow, I want to be like you when I grow up. You know, we can't handle the growth if you don't engage in this thing. We need you to press on. We need you to strain and not go backward. I'm going to give you a little ministry 201 here, okay? This church is at the saturation level. In other words, most ministers, they can grow a church to 60 people, 50, 60 people. Once you get over that, it stops to grow. And the reason being is that minister can't touch everybody, can't meet everybody's needs, can't have a relationship with everybody. And unless that minister learns to raise people up to be able to do what they're doing, it's going to stop. And people start falling away as a result. You can't maintain anything larger. That's what happens. And you stop growing. My question is, who's up for the challenge? Who can drink the cup? It's not going to be easy. Here's the thing, guys. There's a lot of needs in Milwaukee. There's a lot of suffering and pain. A lot of needs in Madison. A lot of needs all over the state. This is ours to take care of. God has put it in our hands to own this thing. This whole thing that happened in Waukesha, in my mind, I can't let it go. This guy drives through all these people. I think hurt 60-some people. I can't remember how many people are dead. 6 died. I can't imagine seeing that. I wasn't there. But I was in a conversation with my mother this week, who lives in Green Bay, but she lived in Waukesha for many, many years. And she says, I know exactly where that happened. In fact, I knew some of those people. I'm like, what? And she said, yeah, the dancing grannies, they tried to recruit me. Of course, she's like 87 now, so I don't think she'd be dancing that much. But that's like, wow, that makes it a little more personal. And we need to personalize this stuff. Feel what God feels. As a parent, you have a baby and it's so pure. And you love that thing. And it does stuff, like Shane was saying, it just lightens up your heart and you just fire it up. Then they say the goofiest things, funniest things. But when they're hurt and they come to you, they feel like, yeah, I'm dad. But then the world begins to corrupt them. And it's painful to watch. They go off to school, they come back, and you're like, where did you learn that? And yet, they got to learn from it. That's the learning curve. And they've got to grow through, and they got to make the right decisions, and eventually you got to let them go, and you're praying and hoping they make the right decisions. And that's how God feels about everybody. And we need to feel what God feels. And that's why I'm calling you, hey, be like Paul. He said, I want to know Christ, power of the resurrection, feel like he did in the cross. I want to die like him. Why? Because it motivates you. It gets you to see things in a whole different light. Changes who you are. Changes your world. Gives you a real purpose. And when you do transform people, isn't it awesome? And God used you. We got to strain for what's ahead. Stay focused. Keep fighting. And to God be the glory. Amen.